historical tours of the two historical buildings downtown. That will be directly after the Mesquite Days Parade. And we'd like to announce the winners from last night's bake-off. We had that over at the Arts Center. We had Deborah Baker, Pat Pfizer, and Amanda Davis. They were the winners. We'd like to thank the judges, who are Josie Frisbee, Teddy Grayjack, and Jean Kelly, for judging, and the sponsors of the prizes was Baja, Broadcast, Walmart, and Smith's. And tonight we'd like to thank the City of Mesquite for hosting this event. We'd like to thank Reliance Connects and Baja Broadcasting for broadcasting this on their channels. And we'd like to thank Aaron Baker for being our cameraman over there. We'd also introduce the rest of the Virgin Valley Historical Society Committee. We have Ryan Toon, Geraldine Zarate, Valerie Jensen, Darlene Reese, and Gail Frainer, and that's it for right now. And also we'd like to thank Ryan and Aaron for being the liaison between us, the committee and the city. And also we'd like to thank Nick Montoya as the chairman of the Mesquite Days for coordinating these events with us. And tonight we'd also welcome our viewing audience at home. Hope you enjoy this. And we'd like to welcome Mr. Hurley's students. Yes, there you go. And clap if he's your favorite student or your teacher. I think they get double extra credit then, Mr. Hurley. Okay. Okay, we'd welcome our panel. Oh, and by the way, I'm Merlin Hafen. I'm with the Historical Society too. I am historical according to my children. So tonight we have Susan Bennett, Charley Hurley, George Cannon, Allison Hughes, and Kent Anderson. The theme for tonight is somewhat of a teacher education type theme. Last month we had a forum that was about the Littlesfield School District and Desi Reber teaching in the one-room school. The theme tonight is somewhat a takeoff on that, but also more of how we got these teachers who came from elsewhere, stayed in the community, teaching, taught, still teaching, retired, still living here, still contributing. And we're just going to talk a little bit about how they found Mesquite, how they came here, their education background, things like that. We appreciate them being here, and we appreciate them for all their efforts in the community and at school. So first, we'd start off with Susan. If you would tell us just a little bit about yourself, what university you graduated from, what area of education you taught in, and where you were from before you came to Mesquite.
I'm from Ogden, Utah. I graduated from Ogden High. I went to Weber State for 2 years, majored in theater, then went to Utah State, majored in theater and journalism. Then I also have a degree from UNLV in secondary ed with an emphasis in writing. I taught in Las Vegas, worked for the Review-Journal, and my husband was working in St. George, and I wanted to move to St. George, so I had a friend and said, please find me a job in Mesquite teaching. She did, and here I am. Been here ever since I came here in 1986.
Okay, thank you. Also, you mentioned your husband. He taught at the school too, didn't he?
Yes, I finally got him out of the convention business, got him back into teaching school, and he made a lot of contributions to the community.
And what did he teach?
Well, he taught English, and it was funny because he had a degree in music from Utah, but in order to get a degree in Nevada, he'd had to go back and get a whole new degree, and he degree teaching English faster, so that's what he did. He's the one that's responsible for bringing the AR program to the community, in the reading, because he see a need for reading, so that's he really worked.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hurley, you came the farthest away, and how did you ever find Mesquite?
Um, an alumnus of West Virginia University, class of 73. I graduated from Southern Utah University in 79. I received a master's degree in athletic administration from Idaho State in 88. I was in the Navy with a boy from Las Vegas who happened to get the Review Journal, and I kept reading about a school called Virgin Valley. And Kirk Brotherson was their basketball coach. And I just got very lucky to meet my friend's sister and married her. So after I got out of the Navy, I decided to come west, and after I got out of SUU, I'd always told myself, you know, Virgin Valley, those kids have got to be tough. I mean, to go into a game with Virgin Valley across your uniform, you better be tough. And after being out there for a couple of years and coaching at Southern Utah University up there, I kept hearing more and more about Kirk Brotherson. So I decided to come down and in 1979 and student teach and try to learn under coach. And, you know, the kids weren't really that tough. They were good athletes, but they were really nice kids. You know, they weren't like where I was from, where we knocked each other down all the time. And after 1 year here, I had to go to Indian Springs for a year, came back again, and never wanted to leave. Not that somebody might want to run me out, but I just wanted to leave.
I don't want to say that I was there when you came, because that kind of dates me too, but I think I can say that I had a hand in making you a good teacher because I was there when you were doing your student teaching.
Dr. Jeffs was the administrator. That's how far back it was.
Yeah, well, okay, well, that's good enough. Mr. Cannon, you came from up north. What was your educational background? And you're still teaching, right?
Well, it's kind of different. You know, I just want to say something about Mr. Hurley. A lot of people don't know he was in the Navy. And he did a lot of coaching in the Navy. In fact, he sailed above the Arctic Circle, I believe. And he has a little thing that shows that he did that. But he's had a lot of interesting experiences. It's interesting. I've taught with Mr. Hurley. In fact, all these people up here, I've taught with every one of them in some form or another. But amazing people. I just wanted to let you know that these people here are class act. I consider I was under Mr. Anderson as a principal for a while. His brother's the one I came under, David Anderson, and he's the one that hired me back in '85, and I've just enjoyed it. I'm originally from Haleiwa, Oahu, Hawaii, if you know where that is. That's where I grew up as a young boy, surfed all my days as a young kid. And my parents, when I was in high school, decided to leave the islands, and we moved to St. George, Utah. And I finished up high school at Dixie High School. I went to Dixie State at that time, received my associate. Then I went to Brigham Young University, got my bachelor's degree there, and then I also got my master's there. I taught at Manila High School before I came down here. I've always wanted to get back south. Manila's really cold. It's up right next to Wyoming. And I taught up there, a lot of different things that I taught at. It was interesting when you're in a small school. I was in a school of 150 in the high school. And so I taught like PE first period, second period was like health, third period was like physiology. Then I taught driver's ed, and then I taught, I had a special ed class, and then I had auto shop for the end of the day. In the auto shop, they gave me the whole area where all the buses were, so we had all the tools to work on because I had all those different backgrounds. So I kind of taught everything, and then I heard about this opportunity to come down here. Glenn Crowther was the only person teaching special ed at the time besides Susan Salzman. There was an opening. I believe it was Eugene Hughes that had left, if I remember right, gone down to Arizona or something like that. And so I heard about that and came down. In fact, one of the first people I met was Valerie in the front office. Just met some incredible people. I had an opportunity to either teach in St. George or here. Interviewed up there. They wanted to hire me really bad. Came down here. When I met the kids, I decided this is where I want to come because Mr. Anderson walked me around to different classes. I had a chance to meet some kids that I thought, I'm impressed, and this is where I want my kids to grow up.
Oh, good. Thank you. Mrs. Hughes, or should we call you Mrs. A. Hughes, like we did? What was your background, and where did you go to college?
I went to, I grew up in Parowan, Utah, just up the road about 100 miles, and attending, first it was called, this is how old I am, College of Southern Utah, which is now SUU, which has been about three things in between them. Went there for a year, and then I transferred to Utah State University, where I got my bachelor's degree. And then I was hired in a little community called Alamo, Nevada. Most of you probably know where that is. But I was kind of like Mr. Cannon at that point. There was 4 teachers in the school, and very interesting situation. And Mr. Anderson next to me, his dad was the custodian over there. And it's a long story, but anyway, his dad and my dad back in Southern Utah had been good friends, and he knew that I was real anxious to get to somewhere where there's a few more on I-15 and a few things like that, you know. And so he told his son, who was David Anderson over here, that I was interested in the position, and he was like the assistant principal at that time. But I was hired by a principal named Blaine Allen, and that was before most of your parents were born. I came here in 1969, so that makes me the longest lived of this group, the longest here in Virgin Valley. I know somebody older, but I'm not going to say who it is. And I taught home economics at first for about 12 years, here and there, stopping and starting as I had my family. And then at that time, you had to be responsible for classes, dances, and that kind of thing. And I had a little family, and that was hard for me to do the evening work. And so I made a decision to get an elementary teaching degree. And so I spent the last half of my career teaching 4th grade at Virgin Valley Elementary.
And then what did you do after you taught at Virgin Valley?
Well, then I went to Las Vegas as an assistant principal for 3 years. Then I was appointed as the principal at U. Perkins Elementary in Moapa, where I finished my 30 years over there.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Anderson, what about you?
That's a good question. What about me? I, like Allison, was raised up in southern Utah, a little town called Enoch. And I attended Cedar City High School, where I graduated. And upon graduation, it was right during, and this is going to date me, right during the Korean War. And so they either said, do something or we'll do it for you in relationship to my military obligations. So right out of high school, I went into the Air Force, spent 4 years in the Air Force. And upon completion of that, I then went to Cedar, where I received my associate degree. And from there up to Utah State, where I received my bachelor's degree in biological science. From there, I went down to Southern Nevada in Henderson, and I taught in Henderson for 6 years, and then I was made the dean of students at that time, and spent some years, 7 or 8 years as dean of students. And they gave me the opportunity to be an assistant principal at the middle school, and so I became the assistant principal of Burkholder Junior High School at that time. And I spent 27 years there. And following that, I was asked to come up here by Mrs. Mannion, who was the assistant superintendent at the time, and was asked to come up here and take over as the principal of the school. At that time, the school was, of course, K through 12 was all located here on the campus in the middle of town. And so that was an interesting experience. I really enjoyed that. That was probably one of the highlights of my experiences when I had the opportunity to work with K through 12 students. And then, of course, I was deeply involved with Valerie in the building of the new high school. And if we have some time, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, but that's my background.
Okay. Thank you. Also, on that, when you were made the principal up here, could you elaborate on who was the principal before you?
Well, I don't talk much about it, but yes, my older brother was the principal up here at the time, and so, but I did appreciate the fact that he kept his nose out of my business, and I really appreciated that, and we got along fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question we have is pretty much been answered on what brought you to Mesquite and the year you came. One of the next questions is the administrator. Susan, who was it when you came?
Well, it was Mrs. Mannion who got me the job up here, too, the same year. And Dave Anderson, she just called and told poor Dave, I'm sending you an English teacher and you're stuck with her. And then he decided to leave. I don't know if I could come in or not, but Kent and I came the same year up here.
Okay.
And he became a great friend, wonderful administrator. Felt really bad when he retired. His wife was so supportive. She used to make all the costumes for my plays, and we had a great time.
Mr. Hurley, how about you? How many have you served under?
I couldn't come close to tell you. I started with George Jeffs, but he only stayed principal for about 2 months, so I guess I ran him off. Then Dave Anderson came, and then there was Ken Anderson. Don't ask me to name all the rest of them. They kind of come really quick after that. I remember that Ken and I went on an awful lot of trips together with our wives, athletic trips. I wish I could count how many miles we went to Page every time. But, you know, the person you ought to have up here is Valerie. I mean, Valerie kept us all together. Every time I needed something, I go to Valerie. Every time I lose something, I go to Valerie. Even if I didn't know I'd lost something, Valerie would find it for me. You know, she always took care of all of us. Valerie, we love you.
What about you, Mr. Cannon?
In fact, I think, Valerie, why don't you stand? I don't think all these little kids know who you are. Give her a hand. I'm kind of a soft person, and she might make me cry. But Valerie is just like Mr. Hurley said. She was in there running everything. If we needed something, she got it. And a lot of times when you're in a really small school, picture this, all of you kids are sitting like this. I remember when we're all teaching, and it was all here in the old, well, now it's called the college. But there's an auditorium there. I don't know if it's been increased in size or anything like that. But what would happen is this front row, the kindergarten would sit on that row, just like Ken was talking about. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and all the grades went back, and all of us as teachers sat behind them. Remember those days, Valerie? And we all fit in there really easy. And then there were days that came where we couldn't get everybody in, and we had to come in waves. But I can remember that every Monday, I was always impressed with this with Virgin Valley High School. Every Monday, they started the school day, the week with a prayer. And they prayed that no athlete would get hurt on the field. And we seemed to be playing always, Charlie, against bigger schools or something. But the kids didn't seem to get hurt. And just the excitement that was in the school. But the person who hired me was David Anderson, Ken's brother. Just a wonderful man. Always treated me with great respect and allowed me to do a lot of things and help and coach a lot of different things. In fact, I want to say something. People don't know this. But Charles Hurley, you guys would all be in shock. I was always taken off by the first day I went to see the athletic director because I was a coach. And they said, yeah, just go in the girls' bathroom and walk down the hall, and his office will be on the right, if my memory serves me right. Mr. Hurley? Left. And I says, are you kidding me? It was just a long hall that would lead into the back entrance of this girls' bathroom. And Mr. Hurley's office was down that hall before you ever got in there. Before you got into the bathroom, but I always found that a little strange. But the building had some really neat things, and all of us would be all put in different places and had our opportunities to teach. But a wonderful, wonderful environment. Like I said earlier, the reason I came here is because of the kids, and I still teach. I've been teaching almost 30 years now, and it's still because of the kids. I would teach another 10 years if my body holds out and my eyesight and my brain still keeps working. But you guys are lucky. You don't know how lucky you are to live in a valley like this. Charles Hurley and I have been to a lot of places with coaching. You guys live in one of the neatest places on earth. You're really lucky. There are people that work with you and will make you accomplish anything you want. There's teachers at school that I see at the high school right now that sit there for hours and hours afterwards helping kids to pass classes. A lot of schools, they don't do that. But that's the kind of people that you're around here. And I just want to tell you kids that if this is junior high, I'm kind of getting excited. You'll see an old man like me walking around the school, and I'm just excited to have you come up there. But we love kids, and that's why we do this job. Mr. Hafen, if that answers.
Thank you. Allison, you go back to Blaine Allen, which I do too. So tell us about your experiences with the different administrators and things.
Okay, one interesting thing about Blaine Allen was he really wanted his teachers to be top notch, and so I was at home with my mother and my grandma in Parowan one time, right after I'd been over here to apply for this job. I'd gone home from Alamo for the weekend, and he shows up at the front door at my mother's home, and my father had already passed away, and my grandpa, but he just came by to see what kind of a home environment I was from, what my parents were like, which probably administrator couldn't do nowadays, but he just came to check on me and see if I was somebody he wanted on the faculty, and I thought that was really kind of a special thing for him to do that. And after him, of course, it was David Anderson, and then it was Ken Anderson, and then it was George Jeff. Where was he before? He was after Mr. Allen, yeah, before Dave. Okay, and then about then I probably quit for a while, and then went to the elementary and had just a minute. What's his name that moved the stage? Huh? Yeah, Mr. Miller, and then Mr. Davis, and then then Phyllis Levitt. Then Phyllis Levitt, and that's when I was appointed assistant principal and started driving to Las Vegas every day.
And then that's when you were your own boss.
That's when I became my own boss. That's right.
Tell us where Mr. Allen lived.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Allen lived right across the street from the school, from the old school, and his home is still there, and it's got apartments all behind it now, but there happened to be an apartment in the basement of that house, and since I was the principal, he had hired me. He also mentioned that he had a room available, so I lived in his basement for that year.
Mr. Hurley, didn't you live there too?
In fact, I rented the little apartment he had, my wife and I, beside his house, and Bryce Frainer and his wife were living in the basement. And Bryce, being from here, I assumed knew about irrigation. Well, I had never seen irrigation before, but Blaine asked us on that Saturday if we would make sure we turned the irrigation water on the lawn. Well, I assumed when the water got to the top of the lawn, you stopped the water. I didn't realize you had to stop it a long time before it got there. My wife came out and says, we have water running down the steps into the apartment. And Diane came out and says, Bryce, there's water coming through the window into the apartment. Just an oddity around here.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, since you came, you were the administrator, but tell us a little bit about that.
It took me a little while to clean up the mistakes Dave made, but I had some real good help in that. Of course, I relied very heavily on Valerie, and I appreciated her very, very much. I learned a long time ago, if you want to have a good organization, you get good people around you, and then you get out of the way and let them do their job. And I think that's a good philosophy as far as administration is concerned, is that the critical thing is you need to just find good people around you and then let them do their job and encourage them and give them what they need to do the job, and then move and let them do it.
Now, on that, you were here when it was still K-12, so you had all the teachers, all the grades under one roof.
Right.
Were you here, did you go up to the new high school or for the first year, or you finished by then?
I spent 1 year at the new high school. We worked, of course, to complete the project, and as soon as it's completed, I stayed 1 year, and then I decided, I'm right at the apex of my career, and I just built a new high school, and I had a tremendous faculty around it, and I knew it would be taken care of, and I knew Valerie would keep things in shape, and so I thought, well, after 33 years, that was long enough. I had enough of education.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up question for Mrs. Hughes. Back to Blaine Allen, and again, my days back there, and my mother taught for a couple years under him. Can you tell us about the dress code those first few years that was at Virgin Valley Elementary and high school?
Allen, I know for one, he always wore, I'm probably trying to say, he wore a white shirt every day, and his shoes were always polished. He always made a point of that for all of us, that he always had his shoes polished. He always looked just like Mr. Anderson, just an outstanding, he put forth this really, really fine way he looked for us to look at. Listen to my words. Anyway, but girls wore dresses at that time every day. I didn't wear pants to school until, I don't know. I can remember Steve's mother. I mean, no, not Merlin's mother. She is a teacher. I'm talking about Josh's mother over there. Josh Teach's mother, Jill. And she was one of the first ones that had the guts to come to school in a pair of pants. I can still remember that. She'd always say, well, I'm going to Vegas right after school, so I'm going to wear them now. But pretty soon that turned into something. I can still remember her coming into my home ec class with always really nice. Nothing like, no jeans, I promise you that. So just very dressy is what she'd wear. But sometimes she'd get there with pants on. And Merlin's mother was a teacher. I can remember when she was. And then one more thing I want to mention about Mr. Allen was, and Merlin's mother knows the same thing. When I taught there, I taught a year as single. Then I got married, and I taught 1 year when I was married. And then I was expecting a baby. And Mr. Allen basically didn't say you have to quit, but he kind of said people stop working when they're having a baby and that kind of thing. So, and that same thing happened with your mother too, when she was having Tillman.
And some of that was out of concern for the mother and the baby.
Exactly, and all the children at home and all that kind of thing. Exactly. Just wouldn't be something that an administrator could say it to a person in this day and age. Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Bennett, why have you stayed even after you've retired?
Oh, there are a million reasons. Probably because this is where all my friends were. I love the community. I used to tell my students, complain about mosquitoes, I'd live anywhere I wanted in the world, and I choose to live here. I really enjoy it here. 3 of my sons are here now. One's been with the city for 18 years. Another just retired from the city council. Another one is an administrator at the elementary school. So we all love it here. And that's basically why I stayed here, because of the people, because of the great friends that I made. And, somebody told me a long time ago, when you teach school, there are 2 people you make friends with. You make friends with the secretary and with the head custodian. You cannot go wrong. Boy, that showed the truth with Valerie. I'm not kidding. She'd even go to St. George. No, she went to Cedar City one day and picked up costumes for a musical. So I basically stayed here because of the people, the great friends I've made. It's a great place to live.
Okay, thank you. Also on that, just a follow-up question. I know Mr. Wade up at the high school has a day, it might be even coming up soon, or if he's still doing it, but it's called the Bennett. Can you explain that, describe that a little bit?
For years, I always had my students do some kind of a big writing project, and he took over the AP class that I taught. So he had the students, they do a series of writings, and then one day they come up and they present them, to the community. I don't know why he called it the Bennett. I guess it's because I used to make the poor kids do their presentations in front of the community also. But it's a neat day. It really is. I appreciate it. I always go up and hear the kids read their writings.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hurley, you've been here for a while. What's making you stay?
Well, I originally stayed because of Ellen Whipple, Kirk Brotherson, Eugene Hughes, Ken Jensen. They were all the coaches when I came here. They were the head coaches. And you can only take so many thousands of miles on a yellow bus, or a yeller bus, before you realize that, there's a pretty good people to hang around with. And I've always said I'd like to go back to North Carolina, because that's where heaven's going to be someday. But, I'd have to outlive everybody that I know around here. And the problem is a lot of you are younger than I am, so I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I still have students that come up. I haven't seen them for 10 years. And do you remember when we did this? I'd forgotten about it, but they haven't. My kids were accepted here. Even if I did talk a little funny, nobody bothered me too much about it. Laughed a little occasionally. I just kind of felt like that even though we moved here, we were the only people, I think, in town not related to anybody. But, you wouldn't have known it. We were always invited to somebody's house. I remember your mom and dad invited us over for dinner at your house once. I don't know what's going on. I just remember we went there to eat. I never had to worry about anything. As the kids grew up, you never worried where they were because you had about 15 parents that would tell you where they were. And the same with your kids. If I caught one of the Hafen boys doing something I knew he shouldn't do, would it have bothered me to paddle his behind? No.
That would have been my brothers, not me.
No comment. But I know the same thing. If my son or one of my girls would have got in trouble, I don't have any doubt that any one of the parents in town would have disciplined them. It's hard to leave a place like that.
Speaking of the Yeller Bess, how has the language affected you? You haven't got us to speak Southern yet.
They're learning. I used to always tell them that someday y'all going to wish that you could speak a little Southern dialect. And, I've had several members of our LDS have come back off of mission and says, I wish I listened better. Because when you get up to that training center, they don't teach you to speak Southern up there.
And by the way, what was the Southern word of the day today?
I'm not allowed to do that any longer.
You're kidding.
No, they've stopped that. They stopped it last year. It was a bad influence upon students.
I wish you would have stopped while Estelle was still there. Mr. Cannon, what's kept you still in Mesquite?
I think the main reason is it's like a family. What happens is everyone here really cares about everyone. When I go places and I run into people, even past students, it's funny, you go to the hospital or something and you need something done and there's a past student that you used to have working on you. That means a lot, and they personally know you. Sometimes I've come into the doctor's office and they're full, and the person coming up to the window goes, "Mr. Cannon, why are you waiting? Here, I'll get you right in." You know what I mean? And you're just going, wow. People around here really care about one another. It makes a difference. Like Mr. Hurley says, when I was first coaching here, we used to all go to different coaches' houses once a week before the games. And we would have a dinner, all the coaches together. I remember going to Evan's house and Kirk's house. All these coaches, we'd sit there and have dinner, and everybody loved each other. And the only thing, we'd go out on the field to get done with the volleyball game. We'd be down there cheering for the football. Every athletic event there was, everybody would be cheering for it. That's kind of unique, and I wanted my kids to have this same experience, and so I want them to stay here, and I'd like them to see those same things. And my kids have enjoyed growing up here.
Thank you. Mrs. Hughes, tell us your story of why you've stayed and what his name is.
Nice name, okay. When all these other folks here came, they brought a spouse with them, but that wasn't me. I was the old maid school teacher when I got here. And so some lucky guy found me, or I found something, however it worked out. My husband always says that I chased him until he said yes or something like that, but he's wrong. I stayed here because I married Charley Hughes and had a lovely life together. And he was a farm family; we weren't going anywhere, and the Hafens know how that is. And we raised our children here, and his family was all here. My family is mostly in Utah still, but we're close by. And this has become home to me because this is where my husband's home was.
Now, as you're talking about being an old maid school teacher here, tell us about your mother-in-law. Did she do the same thing?
My mother-in-law came, I don't know how many years before me, plenty. And she came from Duchesne County, Utah, and she told me about riding into Mesquite on the Greyhound bus. And I did at least have a car of my own, but she came on the Greyhound bus, and just a little short story about her. She had this real nice suit she'd put on at home somewhere, wherever she left from, and with nylons and these high heels and everything. And she said as she came down the highway, it wouldn't have been a freeway then, she came down the highway, the weather started changing on her, and pretty soon she took off the jacket, and then after a while she was really uncomfortable. The nylons came off, but she kept, I'm sure everything else. But she said sweat was running off her face when she got to town because she had no idea what weather was going to be like in Mesquite, Nevada in July or August, whenever she showed up here. But she found another Hughes named Archie. That's my father-in-law, and she married him, and they raised their family here as well. So.
And she was also a school teacher, correct?
She taught school. That's what she was. She was a first grade teacher. Probably some people here in the back room have had her for their teacher.
Yeah,
and,
well, she taught me in third, so.
Oh, yeah. Then she moved to third. Yeah, my husband missed his mother because when he was in first grade, she was in third, and then when he was in second, she went to first. So he missed his mother as a teacher, which he.
Yeah, she's a smart woman.
Something like that. She got lucky and missed him or something. He was the middle child, though, so he was all calm. Don't worry about that.
Craig's the middle child in my family.
Yeah, ask him. He'll tell you that. One thing I wanted to say, though, is everybody else that's here came when Valerie was already at the school. But that I'm so old that Valerie had graduated the year before I got here, and she wasn't at the school yet. There was Darlene Reese's mother-in-law was Amy Reese was the school office manager when I arrived, and then after her was, I think I'm right, Mitzi Adams. She's the only one left, and then were you after her, Valerie? Okay, and so I had both those women as office managers, and they did a great job. But Valerie's the winner with me because we've become close friends over the years, and just like everyone else has said, she's taught us all things and been the backbone of the school as long as she was there, and I want her to know how much I appreciate her. That's why I stayed those, because I have a family, and I became part of the community in that way.
Good. Mr. Anderson. Turn your mic on.
When I retired, my son had an electrical business here in town, and he said, Dad, I think you need to stay around and help me. So that's one of the reasons. And then I also have a daughter that lives here. And but the reason I stayed is, as everyone has indicated, mainly because of the people. We enjoy the people who live here, and we appreciate the opportunity to associate with them and to be around them. But particularly, I think the reason we stayed, the wife and I stayed, is because of our family and our son who has a business, and I went to work for him for 12 years, and so that kept me out of trouble.
Good. We'll start back over with you, Mrs. Bennett, on how have you contributed to the Valley during and after teaching? I know you're involved in a lot of things. Tell us about some of those.
Well, I taught theater here for 12 years at the high school, and then when the new high school was built, Tommy Levitt was the city councilman. He decided we needed an arts council here, where we could have concerts, and so I helped start that, and we're starting our 21st season this coming fall. I also stayed with the theater. We do Mesquite Kids on Stage every summer. I just basically would like to keep the arts alive in town. My daughter-in-law helps me, and Pat Reber. When I first came to town, I felt bad. One person in town that didn't have a relative in town. Pat and I became great friends, and about third week I was here, we decided we're related to the Thatcher, so I felt so comfortable. I finally had a relative in town, and she still is such a great friend. But I don't know, I've done a lot of things. We have worked on dollars for scholars, which scholarships. I've been part of the Historical Society in the past. Just, I found that the more active you stay, the better off you are. You sit home and complain, why, it doesn't do you any good at all. But as long as people, I guess, will have me around, I'll just keep plugging along. But I would say that the cultural arts have probably been the biggest contribution I've had.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hurley, other than teaching, I know you're the athletic director for a while, and coaching, what other things have you?
Yeah, I guess since I came here, I've always tried to make sure that the students had a sense of their family and their family history. You know, everybody has ancestors that have done something. It may have been something famous. It may have not. But if you can relate to what your ancestors have done, I think it may help you understand yourself a little bit more. And I've also always tried to instill upon students as much as I can that, community. This is a great valley. I've seen hundreds of our students move away and move back. It doesn't take long before they realize that everything out there is not gold. There were lots of opportunities here, and as soon as the economy straightens out, there will be once again. And the one thing I guess I'm really proud of, it had to do with athletics, is when I came here, our kids were always traveling everywhere. And when I was in Indian Springs, I started a little baseball tournament of six schools. The next year I came back here and I brought the tournament with me and renamed it the Cactus Classic. The last year I ran it, we had 44 high schools from California, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Oklahoma. We had 17 state champions. We had literally thousands of people and players come into town. We did the same thing with softball. We started that one. We had basketball. Our kids didn't have to go on the road anymore. Our kids could stay at home. Parents didn't have to travel all over. And the neat thing was we had 28 professional scouts coming to watch those kids play. We had all kinds of college coaches come to watch those kids play. I remember my poor wife would stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning in the old mimeograph room with all those fumes running off a small program to hand to each one of those pro scouts. Not on our kids necessarily, but on every kid who was ever important in that tournament that might do something, so the pros and colleges could look at them. Would tell, what their averages were, where they're at, mom, dad, height, weight, you name it. 3 o'clock in the morning, she's finally wrapping the last ones up just so we could get up for that first game, which used to start at 6 a.m. You can imagine guys and girls playing a game outside at 6 o'clock in the morning. But you had to, because we only had 3 fields and we had 96 games. So I like to think that I at least help a little community spirit and pride by bringing those tournaments in.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon.
A little side note, if I remember the stats right at the high school, they read off at one of the faculty meetings. Virgin Valley High School has won more state championships than any other high school in baseball. And I think that could be attributed to what Mr. Hurley was just talking about. We had 9. There's 9 state championships in high school baseball, and that's because of what he's done. There's a lot of people that's done a lot of things. I've always tried to instill in schools, and I still do this, I get the biggest kick out of watching a kid feel good about themselves. And watching somebody come back or say something like, because of you, I graduated, or because I work with behavior kids after school, and I work with the credit recovery kids, and when a kid comes back and says, because of you, I graduated, or because of what you said, you told me I could do this, and I did, and now here's what I'm doing. That's exciting, and when you get somebody to believe in it. So I always think that I get to play all day with kids. I get to pump kids up and try to make them feel good about themselves. And if they can go out into the world and make a difference, that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Allison, you've been involved in education after you served on the school board for a while up in Beaver Dam.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that and other things you've done, landscaping, different things.
Okay, thank you, Merlin. After I did retire, I went into business with my husband. He was opening a landscape business here in town, and so in order to provide the plant material they needed for the landscape, it was sensible for us to open a what we called a garden center, and it was down there next to the post office for a few years. Eventually closed it because of the old saying, "No use being tired and hungry both." It wasn't making much money, and it was very hard work, and so we eventually didn't have that anymore. But at the same time, group of people from up in Beaver Dam came by my little store down there and asked me if I'd run for the school board up in Beaver Dam, because my home is in Arizona. And I agreed to do that, and I was elected. I think I was the only one running, actually. It wasn't much of a race, but it was a really interesting experience for 4 years to serve on that board, because I'd lived in, I'd been working in Clark County, where there's hundreds and hundreds of schools, and the school board they were making big decisions, but they didn't know anything about the day-to-day work at a school, except if their children went there. They didn't really know too much about the day-to-day because they didn't have that opportunity. But up there, you could go and visit the classrooms and be really involved, maybe more than you want to be involved. But it was an interesting change for me, and something I feel I could do some good, and I was thankful that I had that opportunity. And our families just I don't know that I've contributed much to the valley other than that, but my family's lived here always, and they've been in business a lot, and I've just tried to stand behind them and those kind of things.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson, you were also involved in politics before you came, weren't you? Push your...
Keep forgetting to turn that on. I was involved in the city council in Henderson, Nevada, for 4 years, and also served on a consortium in the Las Vegas area, and so I had some political experience there, yes. Enough that I didn't want to get any more involved in it.
So you don't serve on the Bunkerville Town Board?
Yeah. No, I have not served on the Bunkerville Town Board.
But weren't you almost appointed county commissioner or something like that also?
I was. Yes.
That's when you were on the Henderson City Council?
Yeah. Senator Gibson tried to get me on there, and I'm grateful he didn't. But yes, I did have that opportunity presented to me.
You might not have ended up here.
Probably not.
Okay. The last question for here that I'll ask you, and then we will have a roving mic. Mr. Toon over there Ryan will move it around if you have any questions. But the last question I have is if there's any funny experiences that you can share. Yes, I guess the key word there is that you can share with us.
I think one of the funniest experiences when we moved to the high school, we convinced everybody that the theater was haunted. Old theaters are always haunted, but there's some lights in the back of the auditorium that we could never get to go on. Guy fought one over the plans. We had people come up from the district. They'd never get them on. They really wanted them to go on for the dedication. Never got them on. 3 days after dedication, I walked backstage, flipped some lights, and they came on. Been on ever since. There's a custodian that refused to clean the theater because he'd go in, the lights in the tech booth would come on. He'd turn them off, come down, start working. On again, he couldn't find anybody. I'd sit in my office sometimes, and lights in the theater would just come on, go off. And we figured out that it was a man who was murdered at the side of the theater. And I was living in his house at the time, and we feared he was back haunted. So we really spooked a lot of people about this haunted theater. It was pretty fun. We had a lot of good experiences up there, though.
Okay. Mr. Hurley, any for you?
On now? My first year, Mr. Anderson had me teaching 5th grade. I started out with, 6th grade. I had 16 students. The same 16 I started with, I finished with. There's nobody moved in, nobody moved out all year long. That was all the 6th graders in the whole valley was 16. Well, after about 3 weeks, some parents was upset because their straight A students were flunking their spelling tests. So they had a meeting, and they were trying to figure out why these kids just weren't getting their spelling words correct. And they had the spelling papers I brought down with them and so forth. And finally, Joe Bowler looked over and says, I realize what's wrong. They're spelling these words the way Mr. Hurley's pronouncing them. And sure enough, they were having some great hillbilly spellings in there. So at that point, Mr. Anderson made a very crucial decision. Mr. Hurley would teach history to all 3 of the the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, Miss Bowler would teach spelling and to all of them, and Mr. Elmer Hughes would do the math. So to the best of my knowledge, those poor kids probably still can't spell a lick.
But they have a good background in Southern history, correct?
Well, they already knew that the South won the War of Yankee Aggression. You do remember that, right?
I do, yes. George.
A long time ago, it was pretty neat. We lived in a situation where the principal, you could just come to him and ask him anything. I remember coming to Ken as a track coach, and I just got off the phone with the BYU pole vaulting coach. We were having problems with pole vaulting. This is when pole vaulting exploded in the valley since then. And I came up to him and said, Ken, I got the coach on the phone. BYU coach said he'll see us tonight. He says, hey, I says, we don't have a vehicle. Can I just load the kid, my vaulters in the car? We'll throw the poles on top and we're gone. He says, sure. And they were up. We got working with the Olympic type coach for vaulting, and we were back. But we used to get approval to go on trips. It's not like now. Like Charlie was saying, we used to go to Dodgers games. We used to go down track meets that were in Southern California. We could go to Disneyland afterwards. A lot of things like that we just can't do now because of school district policy. But one of the trips that I always did is I had a group of special kids, and I would take them on a special trip. One of the trips that I took them on, and you have to picture the kids, one was Michael Potter, and the other one was Brandon Woods that I'm going to talk about, and they know who I'm talking about. Anyway, they always like to play jokes. And this trip happened to be a tubing trip, a snow tubing trip, and it was at Woods Ranch up above Cedar, up in the canyon there, and it has some little humps and bumps. And they'd never really been on snow very much, and so we were getting them all set, and we're showing them how to tube and go up and down these hills. And I remember pulling Mike and Brandon aside, and I says, now, boys, I know you can see a trail coming out of the woods up there, but I do not want you going down that trail, because if you go down that trail, you'll be gaining so much speed going down this hill, we're going to have a problem. You picture the hill, if any of you have been there, it's a pretty steep hill. It used to be an old ski hill, but there are 3 humps. And then the cars all park in a circle at the very bottom, and it's kind of got a landing area that you run across. After we had been tubing for probably an hour or so, all of a sudden I hear these screams, and I look up the hill, and sure enough, here comes Brandon Woods out of the trees. And he's going full blast. He hasn't even hit the area where the ice is yet, and he's traveling with 30 miles an hour. And he's on one of these giant tractor tubes, and he's just spread out, little kid, he's just a little junior higher, and he's all spread out on this tube. Goes off the first jump and just hangs on to his tube, and you can see it. The tube actually is like he's sitting like this, and it flops over, and he lands face down, going down the hill, and the tube's on top of him, but he's still holding on to the tube. Goes off the next jump, it rights itself and lands perfectly up, and he's still going, and I'm going, $10,000 if I just would have had my camera. And he's still going, and then of course the third jump is the big one, and he comes off of that, and he can't hang on to the tube, so the tube goes one way, he goes the other way, and he lands right on his belly, and he's sliding down the straightaway, and I'm going, oh man, he's got to slow down before he hits those cars. He was going so fast, he slammed into the side of one of these cars, and he's up jumping around. Oh, I'm hurt, Cannon, I'm hurt. And I says, you're Woods, nothing hurts a Woods. And of course, he was just, bumped a little bit, and then pretty soon he was back, and I says, you're not going back up in those trees, but it's amazing.
I can imagine what trouble you'd get into nowadays.
Yeah, I'd be fired.
Allison, how you?
I have 2 short things that I thought were real funny. I was, well, hundreds of funny things have happened, but these were 2 of the ones that stood out for me. And the first one happened the first year that I was there, and at that time there weren't too many high schools in Las Vegas, and so the administrators would have their monthly meeting, and they'd go to each high school to meet. And so once a year they all came out on a school bus, as I remember, to Virgin Valley, and they would have their meeting, and then they would have dinner. And Mr. Allen wanted me to make the dinner, and I was happy to do that with my students. We were happy to do that. And but you have to remember one thing. I grew up on a farm, and we ate beef and pork and horrible thing I think of mutton, which is not lamb. It's something horrible that people ate in the old days. But so we never had a chicken in our home except to lay eggs, and I didn't know anything about chickens. And so he said he thought it'd be nice if we had a chicken dinner. And so I got these chickens, and I thought I could cook them just fine, which turned out that way, but I got ready to cut them up. I had no clue how to cut up a chicken. None. And so Susan Bundy, it was then, Susan Hardy was there at the school. And so she's probably about a sophomore, probably at the most. And so I had to get her aside and ask her how to cut up a chicken. And so that was kind of a funny little happening. Now I know, I've known ever since how to do it. Another funny one was when I had a student, and it's when I was still a home ec teacher, and we were having our sewing project. It was my favorite part of the year because that was my expertise, was sewing. I loved that. And she was pinning some fabric together, this girl was in my class, and I was away helping somebody else with another sewing machine, and she said to me across the room, "Mrs. Hughes, something's wrong." And she said, "I think I swallowed a pin," because she'd been holding pins in her mouth, and she flicked it over with her tongue, and she did. She swallowed a pin. Were you there, Mr. Anderson, that time? And so she had to go get x-rayed, and sure enough, there it was. But we didn't allow students to have their pins in their mouth after that, obviously.
Kent, how about you?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is I remember getting ready. We were getting graduation ready, and in the old gym. And during the process of the 2 or 3 days before, somebody had gotten up into the air conditioning duct and in the gymnasium in the swamp coolers, and had put some flour in there. And so as we proceeded, it got a little warm in there, so we turned the swamp cooler on, and obviously you know what happens. And it was funny, kind of funny at the time. It's funnier now than it was then, yes. But I remember that, and then also I remember Dave telling me that 3 or 4 years before that, maybe Valerie can verify this, if sometime before that, somebody got behind the screen or the backdrop on the stage and threw some ducks up over this top of the thing out into the...
That was the class of '84. That was my class graduation. It was the junior class below that did that to us. But.
That's...
Okay. Yeah, you can be grateful it was only flour. Okay, Ryan. Valerie, do you have anything to rebut on any of these things that... Pardon me? All true? You did everything and you run it? Okay. And I can verify that too. Ryan, will just raise your hand if anybody has a question here. We have a few minutes. Mr. Curtis over here on this side.
My name's Kevin. I'm in 7th grade at Hughes Middle School. I want to ask Charley Hurley if he's glad that his West Virginia Mountaineers are in the Big 12 and how he thinks they'll do.
Absolutely, I'm not. We belong in the ACC, which is our natural rivalries. They talk like we do. We don't talk like Texans. We'll do good this year. After that, it's going to be a long time.
Hello, students. My friend Maggie and I have come to show you what people in the olden days wore, what they looked like. And no, I'm not quite that large behind. They did wear bustles under their dresses. And we thought you might enjoy seeing the kind of clothes people wear even before these people were here. People dressed in clothing, but nothing like you wear today. Thought you might enjoy seeing them.
When it was mentioned about that we all wore dresses to school, I grew up in Idaho, and I moved here when I was a sophomore. And I broke tradition because in Idaho, where it was snowing, we got to wear pants, long pants underneath our dresses to go to football games. And that year, they started football again it was the 62-63 season. And I didn't know any better. I showed up in pants at a football game. And I got called aside that girls don't show up in pants, even if they're under dresses. We don't get to wear pants. And the next day at school, I was called in to the office and told the same thing. And I just kept thinking, what can I do? You know, because I I want to wear pants. I don't want my legs to get cold. And after that, by the end of the season, a lot of the girls were wearing pants under their dresses. And I feel bad about that. You know, the older I get, I feel bad about that. But I was determined I was going to wear my pants underneath my dresses.
Anybody else?
You've talked about some of the extracurricular activities and teams that have gone through Virgin Valley. Are there any that stand out as great teams or fun extracurricular activities? Students that have gone through?
You know, it's after all these years here, everybody always says, which is the best team? When Danny Brotherson played basketball, I always thought that was probably the best team, but Coach Brotherson has always told me it was the 1996-97 basketball team, because he had 5 boys that could score over 10 points any game they wanted to, and all score over 20 sometimes, and they didn't have any superstars. They had 8 boys on the team that was 6'3" or taller. And they all had parts to do with, I think, three state titles in a row. Football, wow, there've been a lot of great teams. Been a lot of great athletes. And I guess my 2 favorite athletes, and I'm going to be raked over the coals for this. Girl-wise, I guess my favorite all-time athlete since I've been here is Lori Brotherson. And boy-wise, it was 2 boys who would surprise you, because neither one of them, I don't believe, were ever superstars, but they worked harder with less than anybody I knew. And one of those was a kid named Aaron Waite and Kenneth Reber. We've had a lot of great athletes, God-given talent, but the 2 of them really had to work hard. And Mr. Cannon can probably tell you a lot more about volleyball, because we did have some good volleyball teams.
Okay, any more questions?
I think Lori Brotherson's the only girl that ever played Division I football or basketball, wasn't she? Up until that time, she played at UNLV. I think she's the only one that ever did that.
I did make one mistake, though. I just saw her yesterday, and she reminded me when she played for me in the 6th grade, I made her shoot a granny shot, and she reminded me of that last night.
Okay, any more questions? Right up front here.
Yeah, what is that?
If you'll see me tomorrow morning, I'll demonstrate it for you. I'm not going to embarrass myself tonight.
Hold him to that in the morning, remember. Okay, anybody else for Ryan? Okay, we would like to thank you all for coming tonight, and thank Aaron and everybody else that participated, and thank our panelists. Give them a round of applause.